Hello to all the keepers, investigators, heroes, and other GMs and players. Today we have an interview with a significant person for Call of Cthulhu. But first of all, I'd like you to know that this interview is organized for Cthulhu Weekend to popularize Call of Cthulhu and other RPGs inspired by Lovecraft heritage in Ukraine. Fest is charitable and is taking place from 1st to 3rd of December online. You can join it using the link in the description. But let's return to our guest. This person played a significant role in a revised edition of Call of Cthulhu 7th edition. It's Майк Мейсон. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Hello, hi. Nice to see you.
For me too. Actually, I tried to find the most interesting questions that could ask our viewers, so I think you'll like them too.
Okay,
So,
I'm looking forward to it.
but first of all, about Lovecraft. When did you read the first story, and what was that?
Oh, the first story. I'm trying to think. I think it was Dagon. Was the first time that I knew that I was reading Lovecraft. I may have read a little Lovecraft when I was younger, but didn't really know who it was. But Dagon was the first story in a collection that I got very soon after picking up the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game, and I then looked into finding some Lovecraft stories and found a collection, and Dagon with the man cast onto the island and finding the monolith on the deserted kind of horrible island. That was the very first story, I think. Yeah, and I really loved it.
And about role-playing games, what was your first experience in RPGs?
In RPGs, that was a few years before. I had been a friend was having a birthday party, and I just thought it was going to be a party, and in fact, when I turned up, they were playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I'd never played or heard of it before. So I joined in, and we rolled dice and had miniatures of wizards and skeletons, and I just thought it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it, and it was like nothing I'd ever played before. And really from that moment, I was hooked on finding out more about Dungeons and Dragons, and then more about role playing in general and other kind of role playing games that were coming out. I've been playing them ever since.
And what about now? Do you have free time for RPGs?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I spend all my time, working on RPGs, Call of Cthulhu particularly. So when I'm playing RPGs, it normally tends to be I'm either running Call of Cthulhu for friends or people at conventions, or I'm play testing new Call of Cthulhu material to make sure it all works okay. So I don't get a lot of time to play other games, but I do try. I have a every other week I play board games with some friends to do something other than Call of Cthulhu for a change. And when I go to conventions, if I can get an opportunity to play in some other games, obviously I try to do that as well. And I'm going to a convention in a week or two's time where I get to play in a game of, I think I'm going to play a game of Traveller, old edition Traveller, and Stormbringer is another one, and so I try and get some opportunity to play other games when I get a chance, but mainly I spend most of my time writing or editing or playing Call of Cthulhu.
In 7th edition, there are so many professions. Which of them do you like the most?
Oh, crikey! Well, many of them really. I guess I always I always liked playing private detectives when I was younger. I thought they were pretty cool, and they looked pretty cool. and they had kind of good combat skills, but they could also investigate, and I kind of like that whole kind of Philip Marlowe kind of noir kind of detective thing. So I guess private detectives are a favorite of mine.
When you start working with material that was created and updated for many years by other authors, everyone wants to not only to save the level of quality of the new edition, but even make it better. When you started to work with 7th edition, what was the mechanic you decided to change first?
Well, it was difficult to say which one first, because it all kind of came about together in a way. But I think one of the things myself and Paul, who worked on the new edition, we wanted to kind of move away from the combat that was very much a kind of I go, you go, I go, you go, and turn it into an opposed role, because we felt that a lot of the time, particularly in Call of Cthulhu, where people don't have high combat skills, it just meant combats were very long and dull. They're a bit boring, because it would be a case of I miss, you miss, I miss, you miss, and it would go on for a while. Whereas moving it to an opposed role would kind of mean that, yeah, most of the time somebody, like in a real fight, somebody would actually win each round. Because in real fights, you don't have this, everyone keep missing each other. Somebody will hit one another. And so that was one of the very first things, to kind of move that to an opposed role basis, because it meant that the combat would be faster, more realistic, and ensure that something kind of dramatic happened every round, which is kind of what you want in a fight scene, really.
Yeah, actually, truth be told, it's my favorite part of the mechanics that are existing
Okay.
for now. This year, 7th edition has some kind of anniversary, as I know, because it's almost 10 years from the release.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's last year was the 40th anniversary of the Call of Cthulhu game, but I think it's around about later this year, around about 10 years of well, maybe not quite, maybe I think it's about 8 years this year. So in 2 more years' time, it will be 10 years of 7th edition, I think, around about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so so many different supplement books were created, but Pulp Cthulhu draws attention the most. Even by the description, it's possible to understand that a supplement book changes rules, turning fragile investigators into heroes of some horror action story like Summerset's The Mummy. Is there any story? How did the idea come to create this supplement?
Pulp Cthulhu, yeah. Pulp Cthulhu was about 20 to nearly 30 years in the making. My colleague Dustin Wright, who still works at Chaosium and looks after customer service and all of those kind of things, she came up with the idea for Pulp Cthulhu some 20 to 30 years ago, and everyone got very excited, and some work was begun, but then it kind of died and fizzled away and never actually came out. So when we were putting together the package for 7th edition Call of Cthulhu, it was suggested that we maybe dig out Pulp Cthulhu and maybe look to actually make it happen. And that's exactly what I did. So I was like an investigator. I had to delve into the archives of Chaosium to find what had been written for this book, nearly 30 years ago, and could I find it? So I had to make my library use and find the documents, and then work out, how useful they would be. And fortunately, there was quite a lot of material around what are the pulps and some scenarios that were still around that I could adapt for the modern system. But what there wasn't is any rules for Pulp Cthulhu. There were no actual rules. It was just scenarios and things like that. So that enabled me to kind of start from scratch in terms of designing the pulp rules to do what I wanted and work with 7th edition as this kind of bolt on and layers of rules you can adopt as an option, and then allow me to kind of redevelop the scenarios to fit these new mechanics, which just as you say, kind of make the player characters more heroic, more, they have more agency and can do a little bit more, and they can survive a lot more, so they can be a bit tougher and take the fight to you know, mythos monsters that normal
Yeah.
investigators would be hard pressed to do, find it hard to do.
And this decision was one of the best, I think, because even for now, when we log into YouTube, to Twitch, we see not only Call of Cthulhu, we see Pulp Cthulhu streams and games, and even one of the best decisions is to create campaigns that are created simultaneously for classic Call of Cthulhu and Pulp Cthulhu.
Yeah, because I recognize that many groups play, you know, have different styles of playing the game, and but they want to play, you know, the same kind of things, but they want to do it in a different style. So having campaigns like Masks of Nyarlathotep and Time to Harvest and things like that, where you can play classic Call of Cthulhu, but you can equally play Pulp Cthulhu with it, with just a few little changes, makes it very easy for groups. And I know that some groups start off playing a campaign in classic and then switch to Pulp. Sometimes they start in Pulp, and then as it gets very investigative, they kind of switch back to classic, and they kind of go between them because the kind of change, the style of play changes with different kind of parts of the campaign to some degree. So they kind of really kind of, you know, go with that and have good fun doing that. Yeah.
Creating books is hard and exciting process. What book was the most interesting to work with?
They're all quite interesting, but I think the Cults of Cthulhu book is probably the one most interesting for me, because it was really kind of doing something that hadn't been done before with the game in terms of really examining what is a cult in the game, how do they work, and how can you help people to kind of create really good villains in
Yeah.
the game for setting up campaigns and so on. And so and that allowed us to also draw along a lot of the original kind of source material in Lovecraft stories and some of the material in older kind of scenarios in Call of Cthulhu, kind of use that to inform us to kind of build a really good manual that's kind of informative, but also a workbook for, you know, designing cults and villains and your own campaigns for the game. And with it all being based around Cthulhu, it kind of it really felt kind of right to do that, because there really hadn't been many books about Cthulhu in the Call of Cthulhu game. So
Yeah.
doing a whole book just about Cthulhu and his cults seemed the right thing to do. That it was kind of a long time coming. You know, we finally got around to putting Cthulhu properly in the game in a way.
One of the books for 7th edition that were released is Through the Ages, that let play a Call of Cthulhu game in different parts of the world and different time periods. If it were possible, what supplement book would you create as additional time period, separate from this book?
I think there's two really. There's two that kind of interest me, the possibility. First is something maybe around the kind of colonial era of Call of Cthulhu, kind of where the first kind of colonial
You mean in America, right?
emigrates to the USA.
Yeah.
So the kind of the Mayflower onwards and that kind of thing. But that kind of period where it's still very much small small groups of people spread out. The land is still pretty much unknown. A kind of almost, you know, taking it a little further, that whole kind of like Sleepy Hollow kind of vibe, with the Headless Horseman, that kind of thing.
Even a vibe from Blackwater Creek, because it's the
Yes,
beginning of Blackwater Creek, the description.
yes, that's right.
That
Yes, so,
yeah.
so that I think that would be a good period. The other period, I think would be cool to explore is the Queen Elizabeth England, where you have John Dee, who we know as kind of in the game has done a translation of the Necronomicon. So clearly he's kind of involved in the mythos in some way. So that period of time would be kind of interesting to explore as well, where you've got this kind of great kind of on the cusp of this big great occult revival in Europe and so forth, and how that kind of, where that kind of fits with the mythos and the dangers involved. I think that would be a potentially quite an interesting, you know, setting as well.
For sure. It's interesting for me, right? Even for me. Hard task is to adapt existing old adventures and campaigns to new editions. Convention rules in core rule books exist, but some books were re-edited and published specially for 7th edition. One of such adventures was Masks of Nyarlathotep. As soon as I finished reading this campaign, I started to search for players, and for now, I have a team of investigators that are searching clues in snowy New York. What was the hardest in work on this adaptation?
Putting it all together. Is that we had I had a team of people, myself, Lynn Hardy, Paul Fricker, and Scott Dorwood as well did some work. And we each took certain chapters to kind of update and redevelop. But once that had been done, they sent them all to me, and then I had to kind of make sure they all fitted together still. So all of the clues in one chapter worked, you know, followed through into the other chapters, and it was all, you know, all the artifacts and spells were right, and the, you know, the text was formatted in the right way, as in each chapter kind of followed a kind of format of the text. So, you know, how the order of the information, how it's presented, is consistent across the whole book. Otherwise, it sort of feels a little odd. So, so it was really a case of having to put this all together and kind of knitting all these strands together and making sure it was consistent was quite a, you know, another job in and of itself, because it took a long time to do, as you can imagine, because all the clues in one chapter, I had to check that they were all correct, and that to every scenario's clue structure was correct, and then map that onto the bigger campaign and make sure that they all linked up. So that's so I can't remember how many scenarios are in Mass now, but there's many, and making sure they all connect, and then make sure that the bonus scenarios fitted in as well, and where they fitted, and putting that all together was probably the hardest part. Yeah.
Actually, yeah. Even for me, I have a feeling that even my team need this board for clues.
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Prologue in Peru was a brand new chapter for this campaign, for revision.
Yes.
Were there other countries for it, and what were they?
We hadn't decided in advance. We kind of left it open, and I asked Scott Dorwood to pitch an idea that what he thought could work with the you know, with the background of the character Jackson Elias and the campaign. And we knew that Elias had written a book, had visited South America, and had written a book about it, and so he felt we could use that, and so he pitched the idea of setting it in Peru, and setting it, you know, a couple of years or so before the main campaign starts. And so once we kind of heard about that and we discussed it, it kind of just seemed like a really good idea. And so we just went with that because it was such a good idea that we didn't really need to look at other possibilities because we thought that would work really well, and get the players, the investigators, to be able to meet Jackson Elias and do an adventure with Jackson Elias and kind of form a bond, which is what we kind of wanted to kind of see happening. So.
And about additional scenarios, could you please tell us some that were not added to the campaign?
To the campaign, well, because it was already quite a big campaign,
of course.
we weren't really looking to add much more to it in terms of new scenarios. So we stuck to the original bonus scenarios in there, but we looked to try and not only update them, but to also to kind of twist their plots a little bit to make it a little bit more interesting if people have played them before, kind of change them up a bit, and also to kind of make them, where we could, make a little bit more of a link to the main campaign rather than just be complete sidetracks. So there's a bonus scenario set in Kenya, where that had nothing to do with the main plot originally, but now that scenario is a site where the party that the investigators are trying to follow, they went there and something bad, they caused something bad to happen that the investigators now need to kind of solve and put to rest. So things like that, we try to kind of build in those kind of connections without them becoming very important to the bigger campaign. They can still be optional, and if you miss them out, you don't lose anything from the main campaign. But by playing them, you add a little bit more depth to the campaign.
Some countries, can't say how many, can say for sure that about one country created prologue for Masks of Nyarlathotep. Have you ever read something of these prologues?
I'm not sure I follow exactly what you mean.
Publisher Black Monk in Poland released prologue for prologue. It's like additional adventure.
Oh, I see. Yes. So no, because it took us nearly 2 years to redevelop Masks of Nyarlathotep to 2 years. So and that was already building in far more material than there was in the original, lots more detail and lots more gameplay. So we really didn't feel we needed to add more because we already added in a prologue, and anything else would just make the book bigger, more expensive, longer to produce, longer to run. We didn't feel it was necessary.
I mean, did you read some of these adventures?
Oh, did I read some? I've saw the Black Monk prologue. And they obviously localized it to Poland and had things going on there. So I could see the value in that for Black Monk, in obviously encouraging Polish players to kind of form a connection to the bigger campaign. That makes sense. But we were publishing it predominantly to the English speaking language, so American and English in Australia. And so we felt what we had done with the book already, suited those players in that sense. So, but I can understand if the Swedish publisher, our licensing in Sweden, wanted to do a kind of a prequel set in Sweden and likewise set in Ukraine or wherever. That kind of makes sense to me. I think that's fine, but we don't need that because we've got an English one already done.
Of course.
Sorted in that way.
For supporting authors, there is a program, Miskatonic University. There are so many books and adventures created there. Do you have the most favorite from this program?
That's very hard for me to answer because One, there are so many that I don't have time to read all of them. And so it would be
Yeah,
kind of
of course.
unfair for me to kind of pick out, that one just because I've read it, when another one I've not read could be as good or even better. So I tend to, I would advise people who are trying to find good material for them on the Miskatonic repository to look at the reviews on Drive Through RPG, look at the reviews that are written about the scenarios and make their own opinions. Because it's just unfair for me to kind of say that one rather than this one. They're all they all bring something different. There are some really fantastic ones, and there's new ones coming every day. And it's really
Yeah.
great to see people from around the world writing Call of Cthulhu scenarios and publishing it on the repository and sharing it with people, because that's really good. So I want to encourage that, but I don't want to um, point people in one direction when that would be unfair.
Fair, fair. It's almost 2 months since the moment when Chaosium announced the release of the supplement book for Arkham. Could you
Yes.
please tell something about this book? Will it be as a campaign or a full city guide as it was for Berlin?
Yeah. So it's more a full guide to the town of Arkham. It's in fact far more detailed than Berlin, in that you have the map of Arkham, and individual buildings are numbered, and you can look the number up in the book, and it will tell you who lives there, the business, whether there's any history, whether there's any mythos connections, any scenario seeds. So it really maps out the whole town, and you can use that to base your scenarios in, run it as a sandbox style campaign, and tell your own stories in Arkham as well. So you can use our published scenarios for Arkham and build them in around it, or you can develop your own as well. So it's very much a kind of like a campaign setting ready made for you, with details all excuse me, many NPCs, many locations, lots of scenario seeds, and all the information you need to kind of run games in the Arkham area. And it comes with these big maps. There's a big map for players, a big street map, and there's another version for keepers with all the information on of who lives where and what. And there's a big outskirts map of all the kind of woods and the strange places outside of Arkham. And there's also a newspaper that comes out, which is the Arkham Advertiser, and that's been excuse me, we created that with the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society, and it's a 4-page kind of big pull-out newspaper that you can use as a prop in your games. So it's got lots of really cool things in there, but ultimately, what's really great is that you've got a complete version of Arkham that you can just use as is, but there's also still room in that for you to kind of design your own elements within Arkham to kind of make it your own version too. So it should provide a lot of inspiration, but also a lot of clear basis for just kind of running your games from Arkham as well. Lots of
That's actually
lots of
fan
investigator information as well about where you can go to train in your firearm skill, and where you can get better with your foreign language skills, and all this kind of thing. That's all in there.
Yeah, that's actually the fantastic news, because 2 years ago I searched for books for Call of Cthulhu, and I found some old edition Arkham book, and I thought, that would be nice to have an Arkham to 7th edition. And here it is. We
Here it
have
is.
a
Yeah,
chance to get it.
here it is. It's a
Do you?
really good stuff. It's really good stuff, and I think you'll really enjoy it. And that's only because one bit of the kind of Miskatonic Valley, because not far from Arkham, you've got Innsmouth and Kingsport, and then Dunwich over there.
Yeah.
And we'll be looking, and we're kind of developing a series of books that looks at each of those kind of places in the same way that we've done Arkham, and it all builds
That's
together to fill up the whole kind of Miskatonic Valley, and you can set whole campaigns across the valley and so
That's
forth.
really fantastic information for us. Actually, do you have any plans to revise any other books from previous editions? Because as I can remember, I heard news that one of the best campaigns are Shadow of Yog-Sothoth, Beyond Mountains of Madness, and as I can remember, for one of editions there was a full guide for Dreamlands.
Yeah, so the next ones we are doing that will be out in English language next year, later in next year, is the Cthulhu by Gaslight, which is the Victorian kind of Victorian London, England, Europe, and a bit of America as well. But that kind of 1880s, 1890s era of foggy streets and Spring-Heeled Jack and Jack the Ripper and all these kind of things going on. So we have 2 volumes Gaslight books coming out, one for the keepers, one for players, and that will be out next year. And we'll be following that up with collection of scenarios and a keeper screen for Gaslight, and also a whole brand new Gaslight campaign, which is really awesome. So that's the next thing. But when we've got a lot of these things I've talked about done, like Innsmouth and Gaslight and so on, we will be looking to redevelop the Dreamlands books, or the Dreamland book, and that's something we've been planning to do for some time. We've just not had the time to do it properly yet. So, but we will get round to doing the Dreamlands. There's also campaigns like Shadows of Yog-Sothoth and the Day of the Beast, or as it was originally called, the Fungi from Yuggoth. Those kind of really old campaigns, we'd like to kind of redevelop those as in due course. There just isn't the time to do everything in at the same time. So we will do them, but it will be down the road, because we've got so many other books we're trying to do as well. And we've got things like the new Orient Express board game, and so we might want to think about whether we want to refresh the Orient Express tabletop game, the role-playing campaign, around about the same time. That might be something we might look into. But there's plenty of new books as well that we've got. I've just sent another book off to lay out called No Time to Scream, which is short kind of one evening scenarios for people to enjoy. And then we've got a new book of 2 Pulp Cthulhu scenarios that they're brand new. And we've also got a mini campaign set in the Arkham area that will kind of come out before the Arkham book, but you'll be able to use with the Arkham book, where you're following up the activities of a group of back in history, these druids back in history, and what they were getting up to, and there's a whole campaign about that kind of thing that kind of links in with Arkham as well. So we've got these are all brand new kind of things. So these are all coming out next year, as well as Gaslight, and we've got lots of cool things coming.
Well, there are so many cool books and interesting that I have a feeling that my players won't leave me free time.
That's the plan.
Yeah. Here is another question. Have you ever visited Ukraine?
No. I've been to Poland 2 or 3 times now, but I've never quite managed to get to Ukraine. It's somewhere I would love to visit one day. Yes.
What of the cities you would like to visit?
Oh well, I think Kyiv and so forth, I think would be great to visit, and anywhere. I mean, I love traveling and seeing new places. So when I go, I like to kind of see things I've not seen before. So when I go to America, often I'm going to the same places like Gen Con and Indianapolis that I kind of know pretty well now. So it's always nice if I'm going somewhere to try and see something a little different, to go somewhere different. So I mean, if I was to come to Ukraine, I would hopefully get your advice and so forth. What should I see is really what I should be saying, because uh, you can point me into the what would be cool for me to see, I guess. So
Oh,
yeah,
of
so I
course.
like all that kind of thing. Yeah.
Of course, it's not only Kyiv, because we have very different cities with very different cultures and
Yeah.
buildings that we can see this culture in these buildings. So it's
Yes.
very
Yeah. That's
different from
fascinating.
Lviv to Odessa, Dnipro, and Kyiv.
Yeah.
And
No,
even
yeah.
even
That's
small
great.
locations like Hortica, Konotop, some kind of that. About Ukraine, if you'd have a chance to create a city guide supplement book as Berlin, what city would you choose for it, for Ukraine?
For Ukraine, it's tough because I don't know Ukraine that well. Excuse me, not as well as I should, perhaps. We tend to focus on capital cities because one, they tend to be a bit bigger, and they tend to be um, more accessible for travelers in terms of investigators. So, because obviously a lot of our players will be playing characters from America or England or Australia, we need to kind of have a reason for them to come to Ukraine, whilst also encouraging those players to also think about playing Ukrainian characters. So we tend to focus on the larger cities because they have better travel links. But that doesn't mean we wouldn't want to cover other places in some way as well. But I think we tend to look at capitals because at the end of the day, bigger cities just mean more things can happen. Whereas if it's quite a small place, if 1 month, one mythos monster turns up and the whole village is gone. So
Yeah,
whereas in a city, you can kind of hide a few mythos monsters around without it destroying everything, kind of thing.
yeah. Let's imagine that you have a chance to talk to your younger self from the moment of the beginning of your career. What would you advise yourself about the career? It's a very interesting question, because I think there are so many game masters that think I need to create something. I know, even I know few such game masters that think how to rebuild some systems for their use.
Sure. I think really the best advice really it would be to um, it's great having ideas, but everyone has ideas. The difference is the people who have ideas who then make something of the idea. So if you have an idea for a scenario or a game or whatever it is, it, it, that's cool, but it's not as cool as you going and writing the scenario or making the game. That's cooler because you get to share it with people and you get to make something you can feel proud of. And so the advice for me would be to, I started making things like that. I started writing scenarios, but I didn't start sharing them until probably I was in my probably early 30s. And my advice would be to all the stuff that I wrote when I was in my 20s would be to just start 10 years earlier than I did in that sense. But yeah, really that's my advice. If you have an idea, then turn it into reality. That's that, and that's what things like the Miskatonic repository are really vehicles to do that. That you can publish your own material on there and have being in full control of it. And all those kind of opportunities didn't exist when I started. We had nothing like that. There was no internet. So now you have all these resources. You have the internet. You have Miskatonic repository. You have all these things. Make use of them, because there's no excuse. There's no excuse now. We had an excuse that we couldn't publish. You know, we didn't have to lay out books. We didn't have to print them. It was all kind of old school. But now you don't need to print things. You can make PDFs at home on your computer, and you can publish those. So there's little excuse, or the bar is lower, but it just means that more people can share. And that my advice is go share, make something, make cool things, because that's what role playing is about: is making cool things, to make cool games, to have cool experiences, and we have great fun doing it.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's right idea. I think they'll see this interview and try something. That was the last question, actually. Thank you for your time.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me, and I hope your event goes well, and everything goes well, really. So yeah, you have all my thoughts and support.
We'll be glad to see you in on our conventions live
I
in
would
Kiev and
definitely
other when it'll be possible.
absolutely.
So,
I would. I'll be definitely would like to come when I'm able to, and give you some support in person. That would be good.
thank you.
And yeah, so thanks very much. And I think you're going to talk to Paul Frickus soon. Is that right? Yeah. So hopefully you'll have a good conversation with him as well. So I'm sure I'm sure that'll be good. So yeah. But
Thank you.
have a great weekend and stay safe, please.
Thank you very much. Do as much as possible. Bye.
Absolutely. Take care. Bye bye.